Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
Good. How are you doing this morning?
I'm awake and I'm getting better every day.
Good. Good. I looked at your drawings that you were working on.
Uh, yeah, that was interesting. Basically, I didn't send you the original reference until a separate email. I don't know.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I downloaded them all.
Okay. All right. Because I got well. Anyway, I think I've sent you that drawing before
Mhm.
a while ago.
Yeah,
But
I think it was one of the really early things you sent, actually.
probably was. Um, but I mean, personally, I think I did one of the better jobs of drawing on the drawing I did based on the reference I had. So,
Right.
but that's my opinion.
Okay. All right. Well, I would kind of concur with you on that one. Good morning, everybody. How are we doing?
Good morning.
Happy Friday. We made it through another week.
Yes, we did.
Yeah,
Yes.
we survived. Yay, we're here. Okay. So I take it that everyone got my email from yesterday,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. And I appreciate you guys sending me stuff. I was in the middle of downloading a bunch of it, actually. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through this morning, and I'm going to show you a couple of things.
Okay.
And then after that, we're going to come back this afternoon, maybe around like, let's say 1 o'clock. And we're going to go from 1 and we're going to cut it off just a little before 2 so I can do my meeting with Fulton County. Okay. And that's going to wrap us up until after Christmas. Gee, which is only next week.
I thought they're going to wrap it up until after New Year, January the 19th or something.
Yeah. The 19th, they'll resume classes. Okay. And you guys should be getting sometime over that period of time, you should be getting a kind of a new list of all the Zoom classes they're going to be offering. Okay. Sorry about that.
Will you be keeping the same schedule then next year?
Yeah, I don't see any. I don't see any point in changing it at this point. So
Agreed. Good.
yeah, I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but I'll ask. Is this working out for you? Having a little, starting a little earlier, having a little more of a gap in between.
Fine. I'm good.
You're good?
It's fine.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I mean it makes it makes it a little less hurried and rushed for me. So I actually get maybe a chance to eat something sometime around noontime, which is kind of nice. But plus, I think timing wise, if we do carry over, there's not a big push to cut it off, so that we can kind of get through what we need to do in the mornings. So yeah, I'm happy with the schedule as it is myself. But if anybody's got any comments or things like that, let me know. Okay. Anyhow, what I wanted to share with you, there's a video on Daniel Sprick. Remember Daniel Sprick?
Hmm.
We looked at some of his work maybe just before I went on vacation, but a really, really good painter and interesting artist. Has a kind of interesting history behind him. And I just kind of watched this video and I got a lot out of it in the sense of, he talks about, kind of how he started out and how he sort of decided at some point in his life that, he was going to be an artist, and that was what he was going to do. And so, I want to share that with you. I think you might, find the story interesting. And I think you'll also get a lot out of just, you get little insights into how he works. And I think that might be helpful. So I'm going to share that with you guys. And it's, I think it's about a 50-minute long video. But, we'll take a good half hour to, whatever we need afterward and kind of talk about it and see what you guys think. And in the meantime, if you guys have work to send to me, go ahead and send it. I'll download it as soon as class is over, and then we'll go through it starting at 1 o'clock, okay? So off we go. Oh, that's not it. Okay. All right, let's try this again. This one. This is what we want. Okay. Everybody see it's Museum Outdoor Arts?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right.
Yes.
So you're seeing the right thing. Good. All right, so off we go.
My real drive in this is a hunger for beauty and a way to internalize it and feed it back to the world, and in the form of painting, which is my attempt at art. It's a hunger and a belief that it's possible. It's both a strength and a weakness, because it's a strength in terms of a core belief and a possibility. But it's a weakness in the sense that it may or may not ever really be achieved. My father built the dental lab in the basement of the house, and worked at this real meticulous, craft-intensive task of making the crowns, bridges, dentures, partials, with screaming brats around in the house. And I do not know how he managed to keep his sanity and accomplish that.
Charlie had bought a real human skull. He used it in his dentistry to show the alignment of teeth in the skull. Then Dan discovered that that skull would take up a good place in some of his art, and he asked his dad if he could borrow it.
He uses it in a lot of his pieces. In my opinion, it's just a prop. It's just something that Dan likes.
The first thing that his dad taught him to draw when he was 4 years old was an airplane. And they spent a lot of time at airports looking at different airplanes.
My father took a blank piece of paper and pencil and drew a cross-section of a biplane, and it's still imprinted on it. It was a blank piece of paper, and then it became something. And it still startles me when I think of it. I can still see his hand and the pencil on that paper, and there was nothing, and then there was something.
he was always an artist at heart. But my dad, Charlie, he felt like Dan needed a career and something to fall back on if the art world didn't work out for him.
My first training after completing high school was voc tech training at Mesa College in Grand Junction, and I took welding. And I took it for a year, and I studied it and practiced it a lot, and developed a pretty good proficiency at it. I liked the challenge of it. I liked the shower of sparks. Most of all, I liked being able to build something that was rock solid. The smoke from the flux made this beautiful little cumulus cloud. And I loved watching that. And it had its own kind of internal light show from the arc well. There was a big clue that I needed to devote my life to aesthetics entirely. I took this kind of hitchhiking trip down to Mexico. It was a big deal for me at the time. In Mexico, I had a backpack and very little or no money, and I slept under bridges and ate the very cheapest food you could get, and depended on the kindness of strangers. And it was essentially like homeless kids you see around here these days. I got a taste of that, and in a way I have to see life in extremes in order to understand the middle part. Yes. On that trip, I had a lot of time to think. I had this kind of, life and death epiphany to completely throw myself into art, and to trying to become an artist as if my life depended on it. And I have to say it really did.
And he came home that summer and he said, Dad, Mom, I'm going to be an artist and I'm going to art school. And if you could help me along the way, pay some of my tuition, fine. If you can't, I'll make it on my own, but I want to be an artist.
What Daniel and I started to talk about is what would be a genre of work we could show at the Museum of Outdoor Arts that is different than a show he's done before.
We did a whole series of landscapes around Rome, very much like Corot, and very much in the same positions where Corot had painted, along the Tiber River, looking at St. Peter's and looking at other parts of Villa Borghese.
We looked at the scenes from Rome that he'd painted and how he'd painted architecture and then how he'd incorporated the light. That he came up with the idea. And he said, I'd really like to explore a show where I'm painting quickly out of doors. And I said, oh, plein air painting. And he said, well, I'd like to call it out of doors because you're an outdoor museum. And then we have a correlation going. He said, I'm going to do a series of small works primarily, maybe a couple of large works, and let's see where it takes us. As I look at the pieces that are in the collection, some of his landscape pieces are very indicative of British landscape painting. And so I think you can pull from different resources that he's learned to develop that you can compare his technique to different kinds of landscape painters, not just one particular type of painter. But I do see the Southwestern influence, and of course he lives in the Southwest, of how he utilizes light in his landscape and how he utilizes light with the ocean.
Dan was about as committed and focused a person as I'd ever met. I mean, he made a decision. He was going to be an artist, and he was going to be the best artist he possibly could be. And so in those years, from 77 to, I think, 80, it was a 3 or 4 year period in there where we spent a lot of time together. And I would go hang out in the studio and he would paint, and I'd watch him paint. And we'd talk about everything: politics, girls, life, marriage. I was married at the time.
Daniel and I actually met in 1975, a very long time ago in Greeley, Colorado. He was a student at UNC. Daniel was in the art department. And so our paths would cross often as I was going to dance and he was going to his art classes. And we struck up a conversation and we became friends and maintained that friendship for several years until I moved back to New York. And then in about 1981, I think Daniel got back in touch and we started doing some letter writing back and forth, which is really sweet. And again, in those days before internet and email, to actually receive letters. And he sent me some photographs or some reproductions of paintings he had done during his time in Florence. And I was quite impressed with them. I had always known that Daniel was going to do something important. He just had a passion, a ferocity about his painting that I didn't see in any of the other students. Before I knew it, Daniel decided to move to Manhattan and our relationship began there.
The first time I met Dan, I was teaching at the National Academy, and he came into one of my classes. I remember when I met him, I was very struck with the kind of earnest drive he had towards everything. And his previous training seemed to be a kind of Western American Impressionism. When he was in my class, it seemed to me he began to, and I guess living in New York City, he seemed to suddenly open up to the possibilities of European art, Renaissance art, Northern Flemish painting, is offering other possibilities than what he might have been familiar with coming out of the West.
In 1984, I followed him back to Colorado, and I thought there is no way, absolutely no way that I could live here. Well, one thing happened after another, and I thought, well, I'll give it a few months. And then before I knew it, I was settled there and we were getting married.
I spent almost all of my time in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. And it worked out perfectly because there wasn't a lot, quite as much distraction as there would be in a big city. I had my own little family formed, and thankfully, I ended up making enough money painting and drawing to keep it afloat, keep those house payments made, and keep food on the table. And it was a really tough stretch.
When I first lived there, I remember thinking, how are we going to buy our next loaf of bread? And we put a show on at the studio. People in the town came and bought paintings for $50, $100. We were just desperate to sell something.
He was hungry, and we bought one of his art pieces in order for him to have money to live on.
Daniel began to bring kind of the domestic side of things into his work. And he did his first large interior painting a few months after I had moved there, which included, a vacuum cleaner that I had bought and some, pots and pans and things. So his world was changing, and therefore his art began to change also.
I was away at summer camp, and my parents had gone on a trip to California, and they came back, and before I even set down my bags, my dad says, "Hey, do you want to see pictures from our trip?" Daniel and I had been out in Monterey, and Daniel looked at me and said, "Wouldn't it be great to live here?" And I said, "Oh yeah, it'd be great." And he said, "Let's just do it." My parents let me help choose the house that we rent for the year. And it ended up being a really wonderful experience. My dad would walk out just down from our house, just a couple of blocks down to the ocean and paint there, sometimes just in the afternoon or evening.
I really developed my outdoor painting more then than anywhere else. I love painting outdoors because every second is pretty much of an emergency for you. You try to be as efficient and trusting your first instinct as much as possible. Actually, I think that is why it helps, what transfers into my studio work is trusting this first instinct and going with it, trying it out. It may work, it may not, but it's usually worthwhile. That's cool. I think I do want to check it out from over there. You know, you spend some time selecting what you're going to do, but not all eternity, because you could spend unlimited amount of time trying to decide something, and finally you better just choose and just do something, go with it, and commit to it, and give it everything you've got. I think that's kind of analogous to our existences.
It's one thing to match and coordinate your eye with your hand and your brush. And it's one thing to replicate the world as we know it. But in Daniel's sense, it transcends that and ultimately becomes a fiction. It really isn't that landscape. It's his poetic interventions of that which he's seeing and that which he's depicting onto the surface of the support of the canvas.
At a certain point, you stop referring to external material and visual stimuli out there and just try to make your own project make sense, make the colors and the values and the compositional shapes make sense with each other, rather than trying to encompass everything in the world. About 25 years ago, I found a dead horse laying in a field up by Carbondale, Colorado, and we got this idea of doing what George Stubbs had done 200 years earlier.
This story is great because it kind of gives you an idea of what it's like to be married to an artist. So we were out hiking one day and we came across this dead horse. And Daniel was just, really taken by it. Just to see this large, beautiful animal dead in the woods with kind of no one knowing that it's there. And I was waitressing at the time, and I was walking home one night, and from down the street, I could smell the most horrible smell of decaying flesh. And right away I knew, I thought, oh no, Daniel went and got a horse. And I walk into our driveway, and there he is in the back of his red pickup truck, taking the meat off of the horse. And I was just kind of amazed and appalled. And at the same time just thought, this guy is, who else would do that? This guy is just unbelievable.
That is one of my most unusual memories from childhood, is of the dead, decomposing horse in the bathtub in the backyard that smelled like formaldehyde. And I remember kind of sneaking back there and sneaking a peek at it and just thinking it was a little strange because it was.
We moved to a larger home. He packed up all the bones and took them with him. And then when we moved to Denver, 30 years later, I don't know, 28 years later, again, the bones came to Denver, this big pile of bones. When I married Daniel, I knew, and when I got involved in relationships, I knew that I would always be second to art. That's a given. If you're an artist such as Daniel, I mean, he's just, you know, so, he's a true artist, you know, and he, I mean, he needs art like most of us need breath. So his first muse is the artwork itself.
While I was in Denver, I met a guy named Kwan who was good friends with Daniel. And he kept insisting that I go meet Daniel Sprick because of my relationship with Andrew Wyatt. But he mentioned to me that Daniel Sprick was a huge fan of Andrew Wyatt's. He also said that he's almost the patron saint of Denver, how everybody loves him personally and his work. And usually when people are a huge fan of Andrew Wyatt, I go out of my way to meet them. So it was important. You know, I was a little reluctant because since Andy died, I've been in this business 41 years, and I look for inspirational, representational guys. And it's been hard for me to find any. So I avoided it until actually the last day. And they kept saying, well, everybody I ran into said, have you met Daniel? Have you met Daniel? And I said, no, not yet. And then finally I met him. And I went to the studio, and there was this immediate, I don't know what to say. I mean, he and I just got along really well. And I was stunned by the work. I mean, it's very interesting to me. And then we just hit it off. In my opinion, of course, the contemporary realism today is based on facility more so than emotion. I think they're just pictures, in my opinion. I don't think Daniel's paintings are just pictures. Rather than wander around and say, you know, this would be a great painting. I don't think Daniel does that. I think what he paints, he has a relationship with, very similar to what Andrew Wyatt is. I was at Daniel's paintings go much deeper than just pictures. There's a creative process in which he feels some sort of emotional attraction to them, and then he paints them. I think he's pretty much in a genre of his own right now, which comes out of traditional painting.
After I'd been painting for about 20 years, I was in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and I walked up to Jan van Eyck's little painting of a crucifixion, which is just tiny. And you walk up to it from across the room, and it gets your interest from far away. You get closer and closer. Then you get this close, and it just electrifies you. I have found that to probably be the most inspiring work to me. An example of artwork that's done as if the artist means it, believes in it with absolute intensity of purpose. It's done as though it's done with complete conviction and the pursuit of truth and beauty, and that's all I really care about.
His DNA is in his paintings, and you immediately know that there is. To me, that's the most important thing. You don't have to be good or bad. I just have to know they're yours. And the good news about Daniel is I know they're his, and they happen to be great.
He does a lot of preliminary drawings. He does what we would call in the traditional world bozzetti, little preliminary sketches prior to doing the entire composition. So in that sense, he's really keyed into traditional painting techniques that go all the way back to the 16th century of learning how to paint, and also in the way that he works towards a finished large composition. So he will do sketches, compositions, and then a final compositional study before then beginning to block in on a large 6 by 8 foot canvas.
I still find it extremely elusive and difficult and challenging to make a still life that's compelling and interesting. It can be done without any kind of exotic or sensational or unusual subjects. They like just plain, ordinary subjects.
I find still life very, very difficult to bring something new to. And I think Daniel's still lives are an exception to the rule because they're animated in a way. Each element in the painting takes on a life of its own. I think that his still lives have this sort of magical quality. And I like them a lot.
And see, it isn't the subject that really makes it a great painting. It's you're probing it and you're internalizing it and regurgitating it. And you come up with something that never existed at all.
Here's how I would look at Daniel's career. His still lifes may have started off as a replication of, let's say, flowers, of plants, of still life objects, vases. But I think what happened is that Daniel wanted to force himself into the challenge of depicting more and more difficult objects than simply showing a very fallacious arrangement on top of it in the composition.
He sort of straddled this line between surrealism and realism. I can think of one, and I must have seen this 15 years ago, but there was a very large still life, and it included a plate spinning on a stick that was levitating off of the table. I don't even know where that painting is today, but that's the one that I saw, and I saw that 15 years ago. I still remember it today.
In Dan's paintings, there's meticulous attention to detail. He finds glorious things in the real world and concentrates on them, past the point where most people would lose interest. And by spending long times in concentrating deeply, he just sees things that other people wouldn't and reveals them. And it's glorious paintings, and it's wonderful to look at.
I think my first impression, as with most people, is you're just sort of blown away when you first see his work. I mean, the first thing you notice is you're sort of astonished by the realism, the hyper-realism, and the technique, and how skilled he is as a painter. But I think the longer that you spend looking at his paintings, the more that you see that it goes beyond just being a realist contemporary painter.
When you look at the painting over my shoulder, you have the ability to spend time looking at all of the optical challenges that he had included into the picture itself.
My dad would find things around the house all the time to paint. One time after my mom made Christmas dinner, there was I think it was a goose that he liked the way the carcass looked, and he painted the carcass. Or there'd be a broken plate, and he would take that and paint it. Or bugs would fly in the house and die, and he'd pick them up and put them in the painting. And some of my little knickknacks or different things, he would find things around the house, and they'd end up in his painting. Something would go missing, and you'd know where to look for it. It was on his still life table.
We love to look at his arrangements and work it out for ourselves, and that becomes a jarring feature with our mind, because we're expecting to see an actual can of Campbell's soup, and the closer you look, you find out that it isn't. So that's jarring, and so that creates some kind of stimulus for us to look more, deeper, slower, and work out the mechanics of how he arranged this overall composition.
I know that there's a lot that can be read into a lot of his pieces, and that sometimes I've seen cases where people have tried to read too deeply into them and make up things that aren't true, such as clearly this white rose represents your mother and the red rose represents your wife, when my dad's like, well, I just liked the white and red roses.
Daniel's technical expertise, his tremendous skill, but there's also, I think, in those pieces that it gives the viewer complete carte blanche opportunity to interpret it as they wish. He's not really telling, he's showing. And this, I think, is a hallmark of a great artist.
Even when Daniel does his own self-portraits, you can see an emotion in there. And he and I were talking not too long ago about what the self-portrait means to him. And he said, well, it's a readily available subject matter. I don't have to pose that a person. And he said, I think many artists have felt that way, where I can immediately paint myself. And if I'm trying to capture something or study something about the human form, I can almost go outside of myself and just look at myself as the figure and paint myself. I love that explanation of self-portrait.
The self-portrait of Daniel that I own was painted in 1978 or 79. And I watched him paint part of it. He often talked about the challenge of resolving certain problems. And in this painting, he's wearing a white shirt with a white background. And the problem that he was attempting to resolve was how to be able to create dimension white on white. So he was very pleased with this painting because he felt like he had a breakthrough. I had the opportunity to purchase it and was delighted to be able to do that because it really is exactly what Dan looked like at that time.
The subjects for portraits are, it can really be anyone, anytime, anywhere. I'm interested in the broad spectrum of humanity. Everything from a clean-cut, well-dressed man in a tie to a bedraggled poor soul on the street. And everything in between, there's a huge variety of the human condition, and I think all of it counts.
I remember sitting with Daniel at St. Mark's Cafe, and a street person was there, and Daniel came back and photographed this street person, and it became one of his most astonishing portraits. And it is the guy, but he had taken this individual and cast it into a poetic realm that very few others could have achieved.
In the painting Ezekiel, the figure is really dissolving, and it adds to the emotional element of the painting, because he's dissolving into this sort of gritty urban landscape.
There's something intriguing, mysterious about the human image. And if one looks to traditions of the past, paintings from antiquity through the Renaissance and 19th century are so complex and interesting to a contemporary viewer that it challenges one today to find similar human elements in the world really.
I think that's what makes what transforms them from simple portraiture into contemporary, because these are people that one would, could, and does encounter in everyday life. The people who are walking around today, and they're relatable in that way.
I see those two homeless men, two men in purgatory. Maybe there's a part of myself, just a little part of someone I knew, or an uncle I had. You know, I can make connections that suggest, you know, there's a suggestion, an image of a state of being that I can connect with other people I know, or my own life. And then the incredible dignity he gives to us. Two figures. It's extraordinary.
I need a model, and it doesn't really completely look like me. I mean, you know it's them, but it's with variation, and it's just kind of distilled through me, and it's really more interesting when artwork is personalized and it comes through you. I think that's the whole point of doing artwork, is to make something that really doesn't even exist in the world. One of my favorite little truisms is never let facts get in the way of a good story.
It's like a vibration. It's really hard to put your finger on exactly what it is, because you could look at this palette, it's quite distinctive, but that's not completely it. But with the people, what I observed at one point, that he has painted me before, he's painted people I know, and they look exactly like that person, but at the same time they look like Daniel Spritz's species of person. So they all look like they're part of the same species, but slightly different to what we see around. And yet there's the difficulty in explaining it, because what makes that person look? Because you look at a person that he's painted, you're like, that's the person right there. I wouldn't be able to change anything. And yet it's so uniquely his at the same time. The figures in Dan's work, they tend to glow. It almost seems as if they're glowing from the inside out. Like in this portrait here, I don't know how you do that light. I mean, it's incredible. The figure is glowing, the skin is glowing, the background is glowing, and it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary.
And it kind of reminds me of an element he puts into some of his paintings now, where it has that quality of light where it's almost ethereal, where it's almost like the figures or the scene isn't really there, but it is there. It's just a hint of it.
There's this somewhat opalescent quality that they have. And I think that's because he's learned the technique of layering. I think it's a laborious technique. And I think they don't seem labored over, yet they're highly skilled. And I think he's managed to find this technique where they do not look labored over. The use of light in Dan's painting is very much related to the use of light in Northern Flemish painting. As far as the way Dan deals with light, it's contemporary, but it relates to artists in the past. And it's just as valid today as it was in the past.
Whether it's a landscape or a still life or a person, it's just all, it could only have been painted by hand.
I've been looking a long time. Is he the best artist of his genre today? I don't know. I've been looking a long time. There's a few people out there, but I don't think they're as authentic as he is. I find him to be incredibly authentic.
When I really take a step back and think about what he can do, and I'm amazed by it. I think he didn't, if he wasn't my dad, I'm sure I would think that he was an incredible artist, because he is.
He changed the way I looked at art. Daniel's influenced me in a very good way. And, I'm very, very grateful I had the opportunity to know him and to continue to know him as I do.
I think you're born with a gift, and he was one of the fortunate people that really knew what his gift was early on. And yes, you have to work so hard, and you have to be so dedicated, and you have to want it more than anything else in the world. But that natural gift, where does that come from? Where is that? How is that given? To create work of such depth, of such beauty.
The show in itself is something for an artist to be grateful about being welcomed, to show the work. But the show, every show that you do, is just sort of a snapshot of your progress at the time. It's somewhere along the way toward your ultimate evolution as an artist. But no particular show is final. And you certainly hope it's not the best show you're ever going to do. You hope there's really greater accomplishment in the future. but you don't know either. That could end up being, you know, the height of your capabilities and you're going downhill from here. Or it could be that it's really, and what we hope, all of us artists hope, that it's just a stepping stone yet to really better work that's coming in the future. It's not a rare thing to be able to draw, but you combine that with the drive and the hunger and its need to exist and to fight off whatever haunts you. Actually, we humans in general, all of us, we derive much of our self-worth from accomplishment.
He is prodigiously hard working. He works every day. I wonder if that's a component of fear, that if he doesn't exercise, he'll go out of shape. If you don't speak Italian every day, you're going to be a little bit rusty when you go back to Rome. When you don't paint and coordinate your eye and your hand, you're going to be making a lot of mistakes, or it's going to take more time and it's going to be labored, and everybody's going to notice that. So he works every day. He's very serious.
There's never a time when I'm not drawing or painting or doing something. There's very seldom an absence. We'll do it with transparent paint, and that way you could scoot that into the shadow.
Basically have harassed him over the years to learn as much as I can, and he's much too generous for his own good. And so I've been lucky enough to study with him.
It does take some practice.
I also have to get along with him very well as a friend, and then discovered what sort of a generous teacher he is, and that an effective as well.
Yeah,
really?
Yeah, make the ones down here white.
Dan's in Denver kind of embraced the community, the artistic community, and become a part of it, and adds quite a bit to it.
He's doing a lot of religious compositions of the New Testament, but setting them in contemporary settings. So you have the resurrection, which takes place above, looking at the cityscape of Denver. It's terrific.
It's something I've been wanting to do for years, but I didn't really have the thematic material that I thought was quite strong enough until I started reading passages from the Hebrew Old Testament and from the Christian New Testament. There's a mythic proportion. I read about the Bible probably more than the actual Bible. It completely has enhanced my appreciation and understanding of Renaissance and Baroque painting. And I thought, you know, there's a compelling mythological component to it. These stories are bigger than life, and they're way bigger and more complex and interesting and encompassing, much bigger than anything I could come up with in my own experience. It's collective, shared experience. We were raised in a pretty strict Catholic environment. And when we got older, all of us kids pretty well drifted, maybe in reaction because it was kind of forced on us. It's hard for a kid to really conceive of heaven and hell and infinity. I certainly can't to this day. My father and mother really do, and still do, and later in his life became more intensely involved with the church, became a deacon, Catholic deacon. And it's a thing that he and I can converse at length about. He knows much more about it than I do. And so he teaches me, and I'm grateful for that. And it's a good way for us to, a good thing for us to have in common, to relate to each other.
I think it's natural as we begin to grow older and start thinking about our own immortality, start thinking about things, spirituality more and religion more. It might be a way for him to also try to connect with his father's faith in a way and find the stories that and why they were important to his father and why they are important to all of humanity.
He would read, do a great deal of research on particular scenes and then come up with it on his own to depict, I think, a brilliant 21st century interpretation of traditional religious scenes.
Resurrecting these old stories, you know, that have been carried around like the bones for years and years and years, and resurrecting them and showing them in a new light.
He understands that component of narrative, of how to instill the most dramatic moment when he's composing a religious scene.
Read and thought about the ideas for a couple of years before I ever actually even tried to paint anything. Just began to see that these subjects are much bigger than my own world, and yet completely part of my own world. I'm planning on doing an apocalyptic painting, the Four Horsemen, and with using skeleton riders on skeleton horses. I wanted to paint this Four Horsemen bad enough to that I'd actually go through the task of assembling this and put the bones together. It was quite a bit of fun. It took me about a month. It's a project that's much more easily postponed, and I'm glad I did. It was pretty fun to do. I expect to get quite a few paintings out of it. Now, that's a still life subject, actually, and that I won't need to use photographs for, because got it right here in the studio. And that, you know, dead animals and people pose a whole lot better than live.
To be able to take that apart and put it back together and assemble it and really learn about it, it's indicative of those stories you read about some of the masters in the Renaissance time would do that with human bodies.
I think he goes deeper than what an object or a person or an animal is. And he kind of looks into, to again find this, the essence of that thing and bring that out, which is a really great quality, especially in this day and age, because we look at things so quickly now. So many things are coming into our view that we just see them as flashes more. And even meeting people or having discussions, reading endless things on the internet, we don't often delve deep enough to really know what is sitting below the surface of what we're seeing or what we're hearing or what we're looking at. And I think Daniel is able to bring that life out, kind of the living, what we call in yoga, I practice yoga, the pranic force out of the object and show that to the world. It's something very special.
I think that real, genuine beauty is possible in our time, in an art world where it's fundamentally dismissed, I would say. I think genuine, heartfelt, earnestly attempted beauty is It's possible and it's necessary. I think it's what we should try, and I'm trying. And whether or not I succeed is completely for others to determine. But I don't see any other point in devoting a life to this unless it's with a genuine belief in the possibilities of aesthetics. I was walking down a wintry street, and in my imagination, I saw a skeletal rider coming from the opposite direction, not really menacing, but not really passive either. Just kind of a determined stride its own direction. And it just kind of dawned on me on a snowy day to paint the rider going in the opposite direction. No particular meaning, nothing really ominous about it, just like a genre scene. Doesn't everybody encounter a skeletal horse? I've been calling the man with his, shading his eyes, calling it the vision of Ezekiel, or Ezekiel for short. Kind of, an Old Testament prophet, in rags in our time. This time we're not sharing Ezekiel's vision, we're looking at Ezekiel himself. Ezekiel and a man on the street who, as you know, surely had no idea that I was looking for a prophet in him. He was looking for a bottle, and I was looking for a prophet. These men on the street, they're neither here nor there. They're in between, and purgatories, purge, I suppose, and so on. But it just kind of struck me as where I was going with that pain. Thinking of Natalie in the park, it's just not any a biblical or mythic reference, just thinking of her as waking from a dream. It's kind of a purgatory too, between worlds. It kind of is between worlds. Somehow, if you're between worlds, you have your foot in each of them. If there's any other world, and I don't know that there is. It's all I really know is, and only vaguely know, the tangible experience that we all have. And you can't be sure there's any more than that, but we all kind of have, I think, maybe some sort of a consciousness that connects us to each other
maybe that's sort of a dream state. The work is a continuous evolution, and it's a work in progress. And I think for an artist or anybody who's an active searcher and is continually curious and thrives on a series of small changes throughout life. The work is always in progress. It's always evolving, and really will be till the day you lose your curiosity, which is the day you are done.
So what'd you guys think of that?
Loved it. Absolutely loved it.
It was magnificent.
Yeah, I mean,
it was just magnificent.
Yeah, I thought they, well, it's not like your typical YouTube, I guess demonstration or something. It's really more of a finished film, about, this particular artist and his work, and, it gives you some insights into his life and, kind of what he's all about. And, there's a lot of value in looking at things like that and, kind of, I guess for me, because I've kind of made the same choices to go down that same path, kind of comparing your life and your experiences. And, for me, I can kind of see where, I've been at a lot of the same places he's been. And it's, in some ways it's encouraging, and it just, it just shows you, you got to get in there every day. You got to work. You got to keep at it, and don't give up. Just keep putting that paint down there. So,
well, I thought his whole life was painting, just about.
Pretty much so, yeah. Yeah,
so,
I mean,
that's the only reason you become great, is that you become single focused almost, to be able to do that. So yeah, that's pretty much so. What his ex-wife was saying. And I mean, in a lot of cases, to become that good at anything, you pretty much so have to just make that key priority in your life, and just keep at it. So
one of the things that struck me about it was it was reminiscent of the book Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. His ability to shift gears, going from the, deciding what to paint and kind of how to paint it, which artistically came from the right side, and then the technical skills and the ability to put it down in a lot of cases, a very precise manner, which, that's logic. That's on the left side of the brain, and his ability to cross, and he kind of stepped in it too at the very end when he was talking about living in two worlds, being that, having that ability to do that. It just amazed me.
Yes, and also to add to that, I liked the part where, as a child, his father was the dentist. So he took the skeletal head and he used that as well, to extending it on from animals, skeletons, how they move, and able to put that into his art. And it was very interesting about the horse that was dead, and he took the horse and took the skeletal parts of it and kept it all those years, and then finally using it in his art.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I liked how he did the human condition, how he took the people and kind of like had them dissolve into something else in a sense, and just that condition, and looking for like the man on the street who's homeless might be like he was saying Ezekiel or something like that. That was more soul-like, and he could see that condition of that man, and he was able to paint him every little hair on his face. I love the way he could do the hair on the face, and the mustache and the beard. And I loved he actually did a lot of eyelashes, and I love that because I've never been able to do any kind of eyelashes. And I like the way that he did his kind of like with portraits, but then he did a lot of landscapes, and he did a lot of hard surface, and then he did a lot of soft surfaces. So, and I think I like how he also did the way he did the quality of light he had, and sometimes he have a hint, but then he have how he used it. I remember in Thomas Kincaid's paintings, he did every painting had some kind of focus of light. I liked the way he did it in a mixed kind of thing. Kincaid's were more like a landscape with houses and villages and things like that. So, but he had a great and purpose on his paintings. And a lot of it come from his traditional methods, and then he built on that. Then he went outside of that, outside of traditional, because he did, like you always ask us to do, is to do a little skit, a little painting first, so that you can then build on that, so that you do a lot of samples in a sense, and then that painting will be better when you put the composition all together. So you do a little sketches first.
Like, because he was so versatile, he never had to struggle to find a subject to paint. I noticed that his daughter or wife mentioned that if there was an insect around, he would paint the insect. So he found something to paint in everything, something that could be a painting in everything.
I liked also that he had,
and there is that on some of his paintings, he had double images on there. He's doing the painting, showing himself doing the painting, plus there was a mirror image of something. And I like that.
Yeah.
I also like that he said he could go inside of himself and paint himself to his own self-portraits. That's how much he was in touch with painting his eye and hand coordination and being able to know what he looks like. And I dare say many of us, once we leave the mirror, don't remember what we even look like. At least I do. And then you tell us that what we see in the mirror is really not us. So
well, you never see yourself the way that other people see you, because we're used to looking at our reflected image, and then in a lot of ways, I think that's why people dislike photographs of themselves, because they don't look like what we're used to seeing when we're looking at ourselves in a mirror. And so yeah, it's a whole totally different image of who we are.
You have to add on to that too, Charles, because some people say you look like this person, but when you see that person, you don't see yourself in that person, but other people do.
Right. Yeah. Supposedly everybody's got a twin out there. And I think that's probably possible. It's like, how many genetic combinations can you have out there? And quite a few, but you're going to kind of look similar to somebody else at some point. One thing, and Bob brought this up, I think, and I wanted to get back to it. If you look at his paintings, he works in a variety of sizes. He does a lot of very direct, alla prima paintings and things, and a lot of his landscapes and things tend to be relatively small paintings. Okay. And then when he gets to those portraits and, a lot of his more narrative or, if you want to call them allegorical paintings, then, they get much larger. And there's a good reason for that. When you're painting, a human head, to try to paint a human head, the size of your hand or smaller, it becomes very difficult to, be accurate, with that. But if you're painting it, and it's the size of your hand or above, then you can be, more specific about it, more accurate, and get, really get those details, or at least get the illusion of detail, so that it reads, but it's accurate in proportion and structure, and feels. Are we all okay out there?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Let me mute myself. Fine.
Okay. All right. But anyway, yeah, you can be more accurate. So, and I know that a lot of you try to paint portraits and things like that, but if you're going to do that, be kind to yourself and try to work a little bit larger, something like that. Because that's not a subject that really lends itself to, working smaller. So, minimum about 16 by 20. And that would basically, that face would take up, the majority of that canvas, if you're going to be trying to paint, a portrait. And that's as small as I would ever try to, paint a human head.
That's really good information, because I paint small and I really have difficulty when it comes to a portrait or the face part. So I would take this to heart and go bigger.
Yeah. Well, and, even watercolor artists who do portraiture, if you look at the size that they're working at, for the most part, they're working like 20 by 24, 1824, something like that, minimum. And, out of that 18 by 24 canvas, that head is a good, 12 to 14 inches tall. And so, if you think about that, then you can get kind of specific about the anatomy and things like that, and really, put more information into it, without having to really resort to, kind of noodle it and try to make it more detailed. But, just getting it more accurate, those proportions, the spacings, things like that, will help a lot. So, when you're drawing, you could draw a smaller head, but, because you're drawing, you're going to simplify, all those planes and transitions and things like that. When you're painting, it's a much slower process, and you're trying to use that color to turn form and things, and you need that scale to be able to really make those, transitions work. So just be aware of that, and try to, when you're picking a subject to paint, try to do it, think about the scale that you need to work at to really accomplish, what you want. Okay. Pardon?
Are you suggesting that the faces, the heads be at least life size or larger?
Yes.
On a 16 by 20 canvas, I guess that would have to be right.
Yeah, that's minimum. And again, that face would have to take up, the vast majority of that canvas. You're really only going to get, like a head, a little bit of neck and shoulder on there. You're not even going to get down, like low on the chest. It's going to be kind of ending like right at, the bottom of the neck, more or less, to really get that head in scale, about life size. Because if you think about your head, and I know different people have different size heads, but there's not a huge difference there. But on average, about 12 to 14 inches is about,
size.
Yeah, is about the size of, the human skull. And that's from, here to the very crown of the head. And it's also from the front plane to the back of the head. Because if you measure those, they're relatively close, oftentimes. So think about that a little bit, as far as, don't work against yourself and try to take on, doing, something as complicated as a portrait, on this little, 8x10 canvas. Now, I'm not saying that you can't paint a human face on an 8x10 canvas. You certainly can. You can paint all size and shapes of human heads. The thing is, anything really under really a human head that's about the size of your hand or smaller is no longer a portrait. It becomes a figurative painting because, again, you can't, there's no way that you can really be that accurate, otherwise. So, and I've certainly painted figures on, almost full figures on, 8x10 canvases and things, but they're really, at that point, they're just a suggestion. You're not putting in a lot of detail. And so, you've got to kind of figure out what's appropriate, how far do I have to go on this? And, when you're doing, a small painting, sometimes, well, in fact, just about all the time, just getting in the basics and having a suggestion, and not getting caught up in the details is far better, than trying to really, mess with it a lot. It's like once you're at that point and it feels like a human figure and it's moving and it's doing what you want, stop, let go of it, move on. Now if you're working bigger, then you can get in there and you can really kind of play with it, a lot of stuff. So, but to do that, you got to work on a much bigger scale. So, anybody else got anything they want to talk about before we go away?
Well, this is after today. We don't want to see you until next year.
That is true.
Yeah,
that is true. Right. You're not going to see me till next year.
So I want to wish you and everybody who celebrate Christmas a wonderful Christmas. Mm-hmm. And a good new 2021 year.
Yep.
I hope it shall be better.
Okay.
Well, about 1 o'clock session.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm
going to send an email now because there's a lot of people that aren't here. Maybe could you send another email out?
Yeah, I'm going to have to because I'm actually going to have to set up a class for that. So I'm going to go do that now, and I'm going to send it to everybody. So you'll have a link. Okay.
Okay.
Hey.
That'll be for this afternoon, you're saying?
Yeah, at 1 o'clock. I'm going to sneak one more in spite of what Fulton County wants me to do. But now here's the thing to understand. At probably about 5 minutes or 10 minutes till 2, I'll have to go away because I'll have to get ready for the meeting that I have this afternoon, starting at 2. Okay.
We'll finish critiquing the work.
Yes, yeah, that's why I want you to go ahead and send it to me. And I've already got a couple of pieces for you, Wanda, that I wanted to talk about, but we didn't get to the other day. You had gone away or something. I don't know.
Charles, I never participate in the Friday afternoon classes because I'm committed with my church in the recording of the service for Sunday. That's
okay. All right. Well, Armando, we'll miss you. Okay.
We'll see you, all of you, next year.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, you
Have a Merry
have a
Christmas.
good holiday. Okay.
Happy holiday.
Peace on earth, goodwill, everybody.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
All right. So yeah, let me set up that Zoom meeting, and you should be able to find it in about maybe 15 or 20 minutes in your email. Okay.
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 All right.
All right. See everybody later. Bye.
Later.
Bye.
Thank